Hello, Consciously Parenting family. Today on the coffee break, we are going to talk about Halloween. And the scariest part of Halloween for a lot of parents is what we in my house have lovingly nicknamed the candy hangover. Not the ghosts or goblins, but the holy terrors that our children sometimes turn into after the excitement or during or before the excitement of this holiday. So I'm Jen Kobrick, and this is the Conscious Coffee Break. Welcome. We are going to talk about the fun and the scary and the good, bad, and the ugly, as it were, of Halloween. So the first thing I want to say is I want to apologize for not doing this episode last week. It didn't occur to me that it was almost Halloween when we put up the episode last week. Just like it's never too late to repair with our children, it's never too late to reframe some of our ideas about Halloween. And of course, this can apply next year, and this can also apply to lots of other big events and big holidays. So this may be useful in the next couple of months as well. And it's entirely possible that you may still be having some of the effects of the candy hangover in your house, even though it's a few days after Halloween. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about stress and expectations, yours and your children's. So when we're talking about stress, usually we think of stress as being things like a difficult job, a difficult relationship, things that are ongoing and negative. And those are stress. That's a kind of stress for sure. But actually, when we think about stress neurologically, it's anything that puts an organism outside of its comfort zone. So stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Stress allows us to grow, allows us to learn. We can't actually grow and learn without a certain amount of stress. The key is both the kind of stress and the duration of the stress, and that we have healthy ways to cope and work through stress. So the reason I say that is because Halloween involves a lot of stress. Potentially the kinds that we think of in terms of the negative stress. And certainly for our kids, that can be the case as well. But also some of the kinds of stress that we may not usually use the word stress to talk about, but they are a stress from the perspective of our neurology. So that's things like excitement. You know, we think of excitement as a positive thing, and it totally is. And it's fun for our kids to be excited about Halloween, and for some of us to be excited about Halloween too. And the candy and the costumes and the decorations and, you know, maybe in other years, parties. So all of those things are exciting and they're fun and they're great. And, you know, and this is not about getting rid of those, but about recognizing that those are a form of stress. You know, they take some of the resources that we might otherwise have for things like emotion regulation. And especially if the excitement is like really over the top, then especially for young kids, really big excitement can still be too much to handle, even though it's considered a positive emotion. So that's one source of stress. Another big source of stress during Halloween and during any holiday is disruption in routine. So disruption in routine, meaning like maybe dinner time and bedtime are at a different time than normal because of trick-or-treating, or maybe like, for example, in our house on a Saturday, since March, pretty much every Saturday we've gone for a hike or something outdoors, and then we've come home and we've watched a movie as a family and ordered takeout from a local restaurant. So it's this really nice routine that kind of anchors our week during lockdown and during these times, and that didn't happen this Saturday because of Halloween. So, you know, even though my kids, especially my 5-year-old, was super excited about Halloween and about this socially distanced trick-or-treating that our neighborhood did, and about dressing up in a costume and about putting out the decorations, and he was so excited about all those things. And it's still, and you can probably hear my daughter in the background talking about her costume as I say that, because she's very excited about that. Yeah, costumes. And she's talking about the dog's costume. And yeah, so even though those things are exciting and really fun, it's still a departure from our normal Saturday routine. She's saying Teddy's costume. That's our dog. So another source of stress for both us as adults and for children is changes in diet, which can go under the heading of routine. You know, that's part of our routine is our dietary routine, and that changes typically around big holidays, and in particular around Halloween. If you or your children or both basically had candy for dinner, then that is a big departure in your dietary routine. But even if it's just smaller things like eating at a different time or having more candy than usual, even if it's alongside other foods, those are all changes. You want to be a butterfly? We can get your butterfly costume in a minute. So we often in our culture sort of blame the candy, you know, and as I said, you know, we sort of tongue in cheek call this the candy hangover in our house, even though, you know, it's not really just the candy, but I want to name that because we often in our culture blame all of the meltdowns and the chaos that tends to follow Halloween. We blame it on the candy, you know, and we say it's because of it's because of high fructose corn syrup, or it's because of artificial colors, or it's because of sugar, and those things are a stress on our body. So those can add to this pile of stress that our bodies are dealing with. But I imagine that you know, there may be some people watching this whose kids can't have most candy because of allergies, or who are really strict about how much candy they allow their kids to have, or who maybe don't even go trick-or-treating or didn't go trick-or-treating this year and didn't have candy and still had some of this big feelings and big meltdowns after Halloween, and can attest to it not being entirely the candy to blame. And so the answer cannot be entirely limiting the amount of candy that we let our kids eat. So yes, so the candy and the sugar can be a piece of this stress picture, but that's not the entire picture because it's not the entire source of stress, and so it can't be the entire solution. But it is important to recognize that a big departure in diet can be a source of stress, and in particular when that departure looks like a lot of candy. So it's not meeting nutritional and energy needs, and it's, you know, requiring more of our body's resources to try to process. And then the last source of stress I want to talk about is what could be perceived as more of what we typically think of as stress, of the negative things like anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen. And in particular for kids who have a big need to know what's going to happen, and not being able to entirely predict everything that's going to happen around a holiday or around Halloween in particular, can be anxiety inducing or stress inducing for children who are easily scared by some of the things that some people enjoy about Halloween. So that's another piece, and that's a piece that we can prevent some of by talking a lot about that, but we can't prevent all of it because we can't possibly know absolutely everything that's going to happen, exactly how everything's going to happen. And that can be true for us as well. You know, some of us as adults still have a hard time with not knowing exactly how things are going to happen. And especially leading up to a holiday as we're making plans and sometimes changing our plans 8 times. And in particular this year, as I know many parents didn't know what the holiday was going to look like until the last minute. And we're expending a lot of energy in trying to figure that out. And that's likely to be true for other big holidays as we move into that season, about not knowing, you know, what the restrictions will be locally, or whether everyone will be well, and whether we'll gather virtually or in person or not at all, or you know, all of these decisions, that as those decisions are made and discussed and changed, that takes a lot of energy, and that's both a big source of stress for us, but also our children pick up on, us putting forth a lot of energy somewhere else, and that's stressful for them. And all of that is, that's different, and different is stressful, especially for really young kids. And so that can be another piece too. If, if we as adults really enjoy Halloween and put up lots of decorations and plan lots of things, and that takes time and energy, and our kids can pick up on that sometimes as well. So then the other piece that I want to talk about is expectations. So we tend to have expectations around big events. We have ways that we want them to go, ways that we're hoping they go. And if they don't, that can be really disappointing. That can be a source of big, big feelings. For both for us and for our children, so for example, as an adult, we may have an expectation that our kids are going to dress up in their costumes and they're going to take this adorable picture on the porch together, and that they're going to, march up to every door smiling and say trick or treat, and then they're going to say thank you, and that they're going to share their candy with each other. And, we may have all these expectations, and we may have an expectation that we're going to get to have fun and enjoy Halloween and not spend our whole time managing sibling conflicts. And so if we have all these big expectations, then there's a lot of room for us to be disappointed, and for our kids to then pick up on that, or for us to not parent the nicest or have a lot of patience or space for our kids' big feelings because we have our own feelings. And then, of course, our kids may have expectations, especially kids who are old enough to know what Halloween is about. May have an expectation, and especially this year, if Halloween looked really different where you live than how it would look in a normal year, then kids who are old enough to know, what trick-or-treating normally looks like, and who aren't able to get together with their friends to go trick-or-treating, or maybe weren't able to go trick-or-treating at all, or who, only could go to the few houses who had things sitting outside and not up to doors, and so they didn't get as much candy as they had hoped. Or maybe some families can't afford to hand out candy this year and they didn't get as much as they were hoping for, or, there's lots of possibilities for kids to have had expectations that weren't met as well. Or maybe they had an expectation of their costume looking a certain way, and then it turned out that it was cold and they had to wear lots of layers, and so their costume didn't look right, or people couldn't see it under their coat, or maybe they had this great costume idea and nobody could tell what their costume was. So there's a lot of room for expectations to be not met, both for adults and for children. So what do we do, recognizing that holidays bring a lot of stress with them and a lot of expectations, and how do we handle that? What do we do about that? So the first and most important thing is that we make room for the feelings, that we focus on allowing, without allowing anyone to be hurt by the feelings. We allow the feelings to be expressed. So this can look like, that was really disappointing that you didn't get to go trick-or-treating this year. I know you love that, and you must feel so sad not to get to go trick-or-treating with your friends this year. Instead of, at least you still got to go up to some houses and get some candy, that at least, or but, or that kind of thing. That's an indication that we're not making space to validate the feelings that are actually there. And that's true for us as well. That if we're telling those things to ourselves, or if we're trying to talk about our own feelings, and that's the response we're getting from someone else, those are signs that the space is not being made for our own feelings as well. And if you are needing someone, if you're going, but I have nowhere to go where I'm going to get that experience, then we have some free healing story circles. And we also have healing, holistic family consultants who can do one-on-one calls, pretty much anytime and all over the world. So the next piece, which is a part of making space for the feelings, is slowing down. When there's so much to plan and to do, and, events and activities, and even if those things are virtual, There's so much around holidays often, and we have families, and I've actually seen for some families there's even more right now, because the family that's far away that we normally wouldn't be able to get together with, we can get together with virtually, and that's wonderful that we can, see people and have this community with people virtually. But it can sometimes mean that we have even more events than we would normally have, and more and more and more, and that's overwhelming for kids, and it's overwhelming for adults. And what we need in those times is to slow down. Not and that's not even necessarily about the amount of activities that we do, but in the energy that we bring to them and to the spaces between them. Instead of this like, go, 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 next thing, check off the to-do list and hurry, 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 to bring an energy of, okay, deep breath, and we're going to be in this moment together, and we're just going to be here. And allow what comes in this moment, and allow the time and space. And in that slowing down is where we have space for feelings, and it's also where we have space to connect. Because one of the big sources of stress for kids around holidays is that the adults are so busy and so much is going on, and so they feel almost lost in that chaos, and they feel the lack of connection with us. So making time to slow down makes room to have that connection, and to make sure that we're taking time also to notice what their experience is. So we're more likely to pick up on it sooner if they're having a hard time. Before they are having a meltdown, flailing on the floor, we're more likely to notice, okay, it seems like you're having a hard time. How can we change course to meet your needs before you're falling on the ground, flailing and screaming? Another piece of this can be managing expectations. And another way of thinking about this is, don't put plans over people. So again, with recognizing, making the time and space to recognize the needs of everyone in your family, and making those needs more important than the plans and the expectations. So we as adults can work really hard on resourcing ourselves. So making sure that we are blocking out time for the things that fill our own cups, for the things that really meet our own needs. And there was another episode a month or two ago called Self-Care. So you can go back in the video tab and find that episode, and that will really talk more about how we can meet our own needs the most in the least amount of time, so that this doesn't have to be something that takes up enormous amounts of our time when we feel like we've got so many other things going on, but how we can really be targeted with our self-care to really get to what fills our cup the most in the least amount of time when we don't have a lot of time to devote to this. And part of this managing expectations is about making conscious choices about how we celebrate. So when it's not possible to do all the things with all the people all the time, when we're slowing down and we're recognizing that it's too much for us or for our children or both, then we can bring some consciousness to which choices we make. Which are the things that really bring joy and celebration and are fun and are not overwhelming, and which are the pieces of this that are stressful and not actually fun in our family, and maybe they're traditional, so maybe they're fun for some people, but maybe not so much for us, and letting go of those pieces. So being really conscious about celebrating in a way that is as meaningful and that works for our own family. And then the last piece of this, and this is really important after we've done all of those things, and a lot of those things are ideally done in advance of holidays. The last piece of this is to expect the meltdowns. to make that part of the expectations. So often we have expectations of, for Halloween, for example, all the kids are going to get dressed up and they're going to take these cute photos wearing their costumes, and then they're going to go trick or treat and they're going to have this great time, and then they're going to come home and they're going to sort their candy and they're going to share, and they're going to eat like 2 or 3 pieces and they're going to happily put the rest away for another day, and then they're going to happily go off to bed at a reasonably normal bedtime, and then they're going to wake up the next morning in a great mood because they had this great day yesterday, and they're going to be happy to only eat 2 or 3 pieces of candy that next day as well. And that's not how that goes, right? That's not how that goes in my house, and I'm pretty sure that's not how that goes in most of your houses either. So if we start with an expectation that that despite our best intentions and despite attempting to make as much space as possible for our children to get their needs met, and and talking in advance about how much agreeing together rather than just a dictation by the parents of how much candy they can eat on Halloween, but finding a solution together and doing that in advance, and then having trying to manage that. Okay, if they don't want to wear the costume, they don't have to. If they want to, they can. And we're not gonna push them to trick or treat further than they, are comfortable with, and all of those things. And we're gonna make lots of room for their feelings, and we're gonna do all these things, and yet expect that they're gonna wake up the next morning and probably have a meltdown, and maybe the morning after that. and expecting that so that rather than us having layers of our disappointment at our expectations not being met, and our layer of being so tapped out that we can't make room for their feelings when they have that meltdown, if we instead have the expectation that there's gonna be some big feelings because of all of this stress and expectations and everything around this, then we go in with an expectation of, okay, if I'm going to need to support a meltdown tomorrow morning, that I better make sure I do some self-care. I better make sure that I'm well-resourced. I better make sure that I'm, really well-regulated so that I can have room for that meltdown. And then, and if I'm expecting that, then there's no, disappointment that my expectations have for a peaceful morning have not been met because my expectation was that we were going to have a meltdown. So I hope that at the very least this episode has helped you feel like your family is not alone if you are having a candy hangover, or if you have had a candy hangover from Halloween. And I hope that this gives you some ideas and tools going into the rest of the holiday season. And I hope that despite COVID and despite candy hangovers, that you had a fun Halloween, and that your kids had a fun Halloween. And if you have questions, if you're having trouble applying this with your kids, if you're having trouble figuring out, how can I actually go about doing these things, then please feel free to reach out or comment, and we will help you with that. All right. Have a lovely week, and I will see you next week on the next Conscious Coffee Break.